Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first Enterprise Data Strategies session of CData's inaugural Foundations event. I'm really excited to kick off this track with Peter Wilke, who's a system architect at Bayer. He'll be sharing Bayer's journey towards a more interconnected pharmacovigilance process with CData. So thank you for joining us, Peter. Over to you.
Sure. Thank you for the nice introduction and for the warm welcome. So before I start with the actual presentation, I just would like to say a few words about what I actually present today. So first of all, I'll give you a brief overview about pharmacovigilance at Bayer. And then I tell you something about the actual systems interoperability with CData, which we built in pharmacovigilance. Then I will also tell you something about the return on investment, and last but not least, the future of our process automation. Okay, so some of you might have heard about Bayer before. It's a German-based company, but actually we are spread over the world in over 80 countries. And Bayer is not only acting in the pharmaceutical area and also consumer health area, but also in the crop science. And in terms of our pharmaceutical products, we have a lot of different therapeutic areas which we are focusing on. One is, for example, cardiovascular health, but also oncology and women's health. And the research and development in Bayer is really important for us, also really to drive innovation and sustainability. Okay, I would like to tell you something about pharmacovigilance, and it's totally okay that you have never heard about that before. It's a specific department at Bayer, which is a critical element for ensuring the drug safety of our patients and the overall regulatory compliance. Basically, what we are doing is we collect adverse events from different sources that might be maybe during a clinical study where we have a lot of patients, and of course, during that studies, adverse events may happen. And we also have maybe some spontaneous reports which are reported by our customers. And once these reports are received in our department, they are collected and analyzed to see if there is a relation between the product and the actual adverse event. And if there is a serious event, of course, this also needs to be reported to the regulatory health authorities, depending on where the product is sold. So let's assume it's maybe a product which is only sold in England, then it needs to be reported to the health authority in the UK, the MHRA. And for all these components, interoperability is really key for our system to work properly and interact and exchange the data. All right, I will tell you a little bit about the challenges we had in the past. So as you just saw, this is really an important process within any pharmaceutical company. And our main system, which we use to store all of our adverse events, is based on an Oracle database. But unfortunately, this doesn't really provide any kind of proper API standards. So that means, for example, if somebody requires data from our database, any other system, any other department at Bayer, what times in the past, we simply build database links so that they can basically fetch the data and store in their database. But this is actually also kind of error prone, and also the performance is sometimes quite poor. And if we talk about cloud applications, then this is not an option anymore anyway, because the security of database links is something which only works within the same network. And therefore, also one thing you need to consider here is that this also just works when you really have the same database technology. So Sometimes as a kind of additional solutions, we build our own custom scripts, but we also hired, for example, Java developers building our own little web services. And of course, they are working, they are fine, but the process to getting there was always quite time consuming and required a lot of effort. And so therefore, we were basically looking for a new solution. So what was basically the goal of this new solution? So we were looking for a way to standardize all of our integrations between our systems. And first of all the different technologies which we have in our environment need to be supported by this middleware, which we are looking for. Apart from that, since we also want to be cloud ready, everything should be more or less API driven. So our data should be either shareable via an API, or also we need to send data to other APIs. And apart from that, I mean, why stopping here? We want to go even further. And therefore, we were even looking for automating some of our smaller manual tasks. I mean, of course, they didn't take so much time, but nevertheless, we were considering maybe to build some custom scripts, but honestly, that was not really worth the effort. So therefore, having a kind of general solution in our environment, which can be used to easily build such automated solution, would be then also something which would help us here. Alrighty, now I'm going to tell you a little bit how we used CData Arc, one of the great products from CData. So maybe you have heard about CData Arc before, but it's a kind of integration middleware. And the beauty of CData Arc is that it has a visual workflow designer. So basically what you can do, you can choose between different connectors, and each connector has a specific purpose. So for example, one connector can fetch data from a database. The other one can maybe transform an XML into a different XML format. And another connector can maybe just send the whole data or a file via email to specific persons. And when you want to build your flow, you just have to use the right connectors, which are necessary to build the process. You can then obviously configure them just so that they fit your need. And then you connect all these connectors together so that you have one flow, which basically builds the process. And what else we also wanted to have is the native API support. And that's also the beauty in CData Arc, because when you, for example, build a flow, there are different options basically to trigger this flow. So you can, for example, trigger it on a timely manner, that it maybe runs every hour or something like that. But it's also possible in CData Arc to trigger with an API. So it's a kind of webhook which you can use, and then this basically triggers the whole process. And this makes it even better, really, to integrate this flow with other systems or applications. Okay, so let's maybe compare a little bit like how our integrations were set up in the past, before we implemented Arc and after we implemented Arc. So as I just mentioned, in the past, we hired Java developers. They, of course, cost a lot of money so that they can build our custom solutions. Sometimes we also had very strict timelines from the health authorities to send certain reports to their endpoint. And in order to hold this timeline, we really have to speed up our development. And of course, as also just we have data in our database, which might be interesting for other departments at Bayer. So we didn't really have a good possibility to share this data across our functions at Bayer. So after we implemented ARC, we have now a standardized integration framework, which we can easily use to build our processes. We can also automate our regulatory processes. So that is, of course, also very good that we can now really hold the timelines. And as I just mentioned, you can also easily build APIs in CData ARC on your data. And it actually really just takes a few clicks, for example, to have REST API on an existing Oracle table, just as an example. And the good thing is also that it comes along with a documentation. So if you have a different function which needs to access your data, you just set it up, you have the documentation, you share it with any person who needs it, and they can immediately understand how they can call the API in order to get the data. Alrighty, so this is one example, one use case, which I would like to explain a little bit more in detail. And it shows a couple of different connectors and flows which we used in CData ARC. So I mentioned earlier that there is a health authority in the United Kingdom, and it's called the Medicine and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, or MHRA. And they're responsible, amongst other tasks, also really to receive all the adverse events reports from different pharmaceutical companies who sell the products in the UK. So we have a very specific type of report. It's called the MIR report, Manufacturer Incident Report. And technically, this is just an XML file which contains the adverse event information for medical devices, which we sell at Bayer. And the MHRA, they come up with a new requirement. They actually build a kind of new portal where they allowed customers to send these reports, but they also built an API where customers can easily send these MIR XML reports as well. So of course, again, we want to reduce any kind of manual work. So we built this flow or this interface with CData ARC. And here on that screen, you can see on a very high level how we did it. So let me just explain it. As I mentioned earlier, we have an Oracle database, and this one actually also contains not only the case information, but also already the final MIR XML report. So our system is able to generate it. But unfortunately, from there, we still need to export it and then send it to the MHRA REST API. So again, we did that with CData ARC because CData ARC has an Oracle connector, which can be used to fetch any kind of information from our database. So we use that to get the MIR XML. And then it's an XML mapping code. And this allows you to format the MIR XML into the format how it is really required by the REST API from the MHRA. The REST API requires actually the content in the JSON format, but this is also an easy thing because there is a JSON connector in CData ARC as well, which you can simply just use to convert an XML into a proper JSON. So at the end, we then have the JSON with the embedded MIR XML. So the exact way how it is really required by the API. And of course, at the end, there is also a REST API connector in CData ARC, which you can configure, basically enter all the credentials for connecting to the API. And then this information is automatically sent. The response from that API is a kind of acknowledgement for our MIR report. And this can be either positive or negative. And of course, we want to have this information also back in our database so that our users can immediately see which report went out successfully and which maybe failed and require maybe some additional adaptation. So basically, we just use then again the REST API connector and the Oracle database connector in order to import this acknowledgement into our database. Alrighty, our return of investment. So as I just said, basically the regulatory compliance and the safety of our products is really the most important thing for us. And by just having a middleware like a CData Arc really gives us the possibility to fulfill these requirements. We also have a very reliable automated communication now. I mean, as I just said, of course, we build our flows, but it's not only the flow itself in CData Arc which really helps us, because it comes along with a lot of additional benefits. Just to give you some example, I mean, obviously there is a logging mechanism behind it. So each and every step is traceable and can be seen in the logs. So you don't really have to reinvent the wheel here. That's already there in CData Arc. But also things like error handling, retry attempts, and a kind of query for maybe failed attempts. So let me maybe explain that a little bit further in an example. So we just saw the flow which we built for the MHRA, but let's assume the MHRA API is not available for technical reason for a certain amount of time. Of course, all of our reports which are transmitted at that time will fail, but of course, the errors are handled correctly by CData Arc, and our support team will receive an automated email about the information. And the good thing is also that CData Arc is constantly trying then to resend these submissions. And if it still fails after a certain amount of attempts and time, which can be also configured, it just stays in a queue and can be resubmitted anytime by the support team whenever the API is available again. So that's great. And as I just mentioned, so we also really wanted to speed up our development, and most of the things, so for example, the flow you just saw for the MHRA, actually we didn't really need any kind of development team to implement that. So this was done by myself during a couple of hours, and it just took me, a little time and a cup of coffee to implement it. So this was really great. And therefore, we were really able to reduce our costs for external development to a minimum. Okay, what about the future? So we have already the main goal that we use CData Arc for all of our integrations, no matter if it's a flow or maybe an API, which we want to build on top of our data. So this is already our standard solutions for any kind of new integration. However, nevertheless, we still have some of our old running custom solutions, maybe some Python scripts here and there and other things, and they're working fine. So therefore, we didn't touch them yet. But the goal is also here to replace all of them with CData Arc, because any kind of maintenance is just easier in the software than having some custom scripts or custom solutions. And apart from that, as I mentioned in the beginning, so we use the software right now just in the pharmacovigilance department at Bayer. But my plan at least is also to expand it at Bayer and maybe see if any other teams at Bayer can maybe benefit from that solution, so that they can also see all the benefits which we have. All right, so I think we are then coming to the end of my presentation. So we have still a little bit more than 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Peter. That was great. Thanks for explaining it. And it was really good to understand how you built that efficiency into the way that you operate as a department, and also from your perspective, kind of the technical details of how you're able to achieve that. So I thought you bridged that gap really well. So I'd like to ask you a question in the time that we have left. What was the most unexpected learning that you had as you went through your evaluation and implementation of CData Arc?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Um, So, I mean, the funny part is that whenever we start building a new flow, I mean, usually when you do it maybe with any other software, you would probably create some workflow diagrams, UML diagrams, whatever, really just to, let's say, visualize first the flow, how you want to transfer the data from A to B. The good thing is that you can actually already visualize the flow in CData Arc itself. So basically, this is one of our first use cases which we had. And I think it really started like that. I just grabbed the connectors I think would make sense to use for our use case. So I put them all in CData Arc. I connected them, did a little configuration because I just had the idea to visualize first what I really want to build. And then all of a sudden, I realized that the actual whole flow is already completed. So that was really a great achievement and kind of surprised like how fast it really is to build a flow in CData Arc.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's great to hear. Um, One other question. So you had mentioned a couple of times that you used to have Java developers that built out these integrations basically via code, and you obviously had to maintain these integrations over time. My question is, are they the same ones that are implementing the workflows on Arc? And more generally, what's the level of technical depth that's required to be able to
Mhm.
build these integrations?
Yeah. So most of our developers were from an external company, and we actually don't really have them anymore, at least not to that degree compared to the past. And so most of the things built in CData Arc are done by internal colleagues. So we have a kind of team which is, um, let's say, having people with mixed knowledge. They have farmer knowledge, but they also have little IT knowledge. And honestly, this is already enough to build the flow in CData Arc. Of course, you need a little technical knowledge. You need to know like what is an API, how XMLs are working, and so on. But nevertheless, you don't really have to be a developer to build something in CData Arc. So that's the beauty. And I mean, of course, also for me, there was a kind of learning curve for smaller details here and there. But the good thing is also there is a very great documentation. We can look up things. You can see examples, which really help to maybe tackle a specific problem which you might have in CData Arc. And apart from that, also the support team was a great help really to support us whenever we maybe got stuck with a specific problem.
Okay, that's excellent. So we'll take one final question real quick. Question from the chat. What other types of solutions did you evaluate for this project?
Mhm. So we were basically also looking for some other software. We had a look on Talent, you might know. We also looked in Akana. Um, so there were probably a couple of more, but I don't really remember all of them. Um, but so the key decision, or basically the main we went for CData Arc, is that it out of the box supported all of our integrations which we need to build our processes. Of course, you can then also customize certain connectors to a certain degree, and this is also still possible in CData Arc. So for example, if you have like a Java application, you can also build that in a custom connector in CData Arc. And that's of course also possible with other solutions. So at the end, maybe these solutions might work as well. But nevertheless,
Sorry to cut
again,
you
we
off, Peter.
wanted to have a simple.
We're kind of approaching the end of the time here, but that was
Okay.
great. Thank you so much for the response, and thank you so much for sharing your insights here. To the audience, thanks a lot for joining us today for this session.